Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about compile time versus runtime errors. So this is important for your school. If you're still in school, you want to know about compile time versus runtime error in your coding projects or whenever your teacher knows about it. And let's say you're applying for a job, right? You want to know that for your job interview, they're gonna ask you what compile time versus runtime errors are, and then you gotta explain. And even once you get the job, you have to know what the terms compile time and runtime errors are, like when people describe it to you and whenever you're trying to debug something. So a compile time error is basically an error where it's like your code that's an error. So let's just say your code is being given into the compiler. So let's say your code is here, and then this box is your compiler, right? So I'm just gonna call it com, and then the error occurs here because when the compiler is trying to compile your code, something goes wrong here. So then it goes back, and then there's an error. This is basically the basics of a compile time error. So a compile time error consists of code and libraries, and then the compiler basically identifies the errors in the code, and that prevents you from going to an executable file. So that prevents the code from going to the executable file. So once this works, you cannot have this exe file, which is the executable file. Like this doesn't work if the error happens. So syntax errors and variable errors are types of these compile types errors. So let's say you spelled something wrong. So instead of let's say you had the print function, you spelled print. Instead of typing that last T, you forgot to type it, right? So that is an example of a syntax error. Syntax errors are one of the many types of errors that are caused by compile time errors. So your syntax error is one of them, but what are other types of compile time errors? There's also these variable errors, specifically not in Python, but in other languages like C++. You know how you have to put that int or whatever the variable type of a variable is, and then you give the variable, right? And if this is wrong, then that could give a variable error. And this can be very bad for your program as it causes a compile time error. So now that you know what a compile time error is, take a few seconds to digest this, and then we'll move on to what a runtime error is. And then we'll give an overview of both of them. So moving on to our runtime error. So our runtime error is basically an error, your code is all fine, I guess, but there's something wrong, how your application works. So let's say there's a button, and then there's in your program that says to run something, and then when you click the button, it doesn't work. That's an example of a runtime error. When your application works through all the code, your code is technically correct, but it's not working the way that you want it to. So let's say your link is not working, or your link is not working, or maybe your application is showing the wrong time, or anything that your application is doing something wrong than that you've expected. So how this error occurs is when you have your exe file or your executable file, and it goes into that your judgment or your testing mode, right? So in your testing, it doesn't work. So in your testing, it doesn't work. So the error goes back, and then you give the error this time, not a compiler, but you give the error back, and then you fix it back into the syntax errors, and you have to go back to your program. So your runtime error is basically a way of an error when your program is running. So if all goes fine and then your runtime error doesn't happen, then it'll all go fine, and then you'll have a functionable last product. So you have your product. But if it doesn't work, then you have to go back and do it all again, because you have to find out why this button is not working, or why, like, while testing something went wrong, or like why is there this number instead of that one when we calculated everything right. And then you have to go back and debug these runtime errors. And pause for a while you think about the difference between runtime and compile time errors. So now we're going to be talking about the differences between these two errors. So let's go up here. So now this is going to be compile versus runtime errors. So what is the difference between these two errors? So basically, a compile time error is basically your input is your code that you've written. So input is code in short terms. But unlike that, your runtime error is your input is your executable file. So I'm just gonna put exe for short, which is the executable file, like the last thing. And this is your input. And what are some other differences? So the compiler figures out what went wrong. Compiler figures out what is wrong, but then over here, what figures out is wrong is while you're testing. So testing. So what's next? So the other one is that, like, the syntax and variables are not correct, are incorrect. But for this, code is all, and then technically, because it's not actually correct, but technically correct, because it went through all the syntax and variable errors. It's just that the code is not working in the way that it's supposed to. So the code is all technically correct. So that's basically it for today. Now we talked about compile versus runtime errors, and this is a part of a series called All You Need to Know About Computer Science. And I hope you have a great day, and like and subscribe if you like this video.